G'day everyone. It's time to, as we say in Australia, crack a stubby. That's what we call it in Australia, stubby. These are actually called stubbies. I'm sticking to the Coronas because I've got about 4 boxes of these that I'm trying to get through, and it's terribly hard to get through them. So join me if you can. Love to see you have a drink with me. I know it's, what is it here? It's 1:33 here in the afternoon, so that definitely is beer o'clock, as we call it in Australia. Also, it's 34 degrees Celsius, so it's really hot here today, so it's definitely a time for a stubby. So join me for a quick stubby, guys. If you, obviously, if you're in London, it's a bit early in the morning, because I think it's about 1 or 2 in the morning, but clearly if you're in New York or LA or somewhere like that, join me, guys. Cheers. Okay, Tony, nice to see you here, mate. Got some really interesting things to talk to you again. I've obviously had to come on a day earlier than I normally do, which is on Friday in Australia. It's Thursday, your time in America and the USA, because I've got another double wedding this weekend. I had a double wedding last weekend, Friday and Saturday, and I've got a double wedding this weekend tomorrow. And Ben's just joined the group, and he's my second shooter, shooting with me tomorrow. So we're going to be working together. So looking forward to that, Ben. So say hi, guys, if you are now just joining. Love you to say hi in the conversation. Now, clearly, if you can't join the conversation later on, you can ask questions down below. This will be posted straight after this has been put on live. So you will be able to ask questions down there, and I will answer them. I will try also to put some live footage of the weddings I do over the weekend on for you as well. I'm starting to do that and show you a little bit about the behind the scenes. I'm shooting at a couple of amazing locations on the weekend, particularly on Saturday, where I'm shooting with the largest river we've got here in Echuca. So that's going to be pretty amazing as well. It's going to be really hot though, but I'm looking forward to it. I quite like the heat, especially if I can have beer o'clock. I can't do that when I'm shooting weddings though, but I often do in the wedding receptions. I'll obviously have a drink at the end of the day, and that's a pretty common thing here in Australia. You just can't get drunk. I want the photos to be in focus. Just want to say hi to Snapclicks here. Richard's here as well. Carl's here. Stuart's here as well. He's from Sydney here in Australia. Tony's here. Ben's here. Shaku's here. I think that's how you pronounce it. Sorry if I didn't get that right, or is it Sharif? I'm not sure how you pronounce that one. No, Gigonis. I'm getting awful because I've already had a drink. Falani's here. So great to see you here, guys. Please, if you can, give us a thumbs up, because I'd love some more people to join us live. Now, we'll come back to these questions later on, because fire away with questions. Just put @David Osler in the questions there so that it's highlighting. That way I can find them, make sure I don't miss any questions that you guys want to ask. And clearly you can also ask, have a discussion amongst yourselves while we're actually chatting. That's one of the advantages of joining us for the live show, which is a great thing as well. So I'm going to go through a lot of news and stuff like that, and rumours and things like that in a second with you guys. So it'll be interesting. I am going to, just to let you know too, I am going to get back to setting up your wedding and photography business. I've just been so busy that I will get back to that. And remember, guys, I am a working studio, so unlike a lot of YouTube reviewers and people out there, I actually am running a full-time studio. So that obviously has to have preference or precedence. So, I do have to make sure that that's running first before I can do anything else. But I definitely want to get back to that, setting up your photography studio, because I want to show you more of the software side of things that I haven't gone through with you guys yet, so I will be doing that. One person saying it's freezing in Ontario, Canada. It's really hot here. I think we've had 7 or 8 days now of over 33 degrees or something. It's beautiful. I love it. I love summer. So let's get through to some of the news and rumours, because we'll get it stuck into all of that. Now, I'm just going to go basically here talking about some of the sales at the moment. There is a lot of, obviously, the Black Friday sales that are coming up, and I notice that there's a few here that are talking about, this is B&H, and it's coming up with Sony savings that are coming up. I've noticed it's mostly... With the savings, I've noticed it's mostly their cameras that aren't the newer cameras. Like, you will not see the Sony A9 or the A7RIII, obviously. The G Master lenses you very rarely ever see on special, so they never tend to be on special either. But it is things like the A6000 has got stacks of specials everywhere. I've seen a couple with the A7RIII. I'm not going to go through all of them with you, but I just thought I'd show you some that have popped up this morning that you could actually get. If you're interested in batteries and things, I've found that you can get those cheaper as well. You know, the FE 50mm is $50 off. Some of the prices are good. Like, for instance, if you're after the A6500 camera with the 55-210 combo, that's $400 off. So it obviously depends on which cameras you're after. I did notice this morning too that there was an A7 III on B&H, A7 II I mean. Where was that one? There, the A7RIII mirrorless camera at the moment is $2398, which is $500 off, which is a great price if you wanted to buy that camera. I do think too, if you wanted to get a cheaper A7RIII, once the A7RIII is out, sorry, the A7RIII there probably will be a few that's sold. So if you did want to wait, you might get a really good second-hand one. Cheers, guys. Oh, I've had this in the freezer. It's so good. Oh, I might have to have another one after after we finish with you guys. So they're basically, obviously a reasonable special there if you wanted to get into the flashes. There's A7 IIs are fairly cheap at the moment, $200-300 off. I wouldn't be buying an A7 II though now. I'd get an A6500 than an A7 II. But there is a stack of things that are on special. But one thing that I actually interests me too, oh well, I'll show you this first, was for the European viewers out there, there was a really good deal for the 16-35 GM. It's £450 or euro off, which is a good special if you wanted to get that. I'll put all of these links down below once this is finished, so you can go there if you want to get that. But if you did want to get that 16-35, there is a good special on that at the moment. This actually interests me though a little bit, because I've been using the Voigtlander on my GH5 and I really love that lens, and one day I may get a couple of these for the Sony lenses as well, just for the video side of things. But it's beautiful to use, and I've noticed that they have got a few savings on the Voigtlander lenses at the moment. If you wanted a really fast lens, you could obviously get this Speedmaster, Mikoton Speedmaster. That's $599. That's 0.95, 35mm, so that's really fast if you wanted to work in extremely low light. That can really help too if you're doing things like using your A6500 or A6300 and the low light's not as good as, say, the A7R II or A7R III. If you put a really fast lens on there, you will have to manual focus, but it will give you really good light because you can lower that ISO down if you need to. I've got the 10.5, 0.95 on the GH5, and it's incredible. This Voigtlander here is the 12mm 5.6, and that's a saving of $100 at the moment. And there's also a Voigtlander wide 10mm 5.6 as well, which is a saving of $100, which is $9.99 as well. So if you did want to get into some primes, just beware they are all manual focus. But I found with these lenses that it's really good. If you're not using the fly-by-wire, the focusing mechanism on these cameras is so good. And remember, with focus peaking and your focus enlargement when you are doing manual focus, it's not an issue anymore, guys. Don't be scared to use manual focus lenses. They do work really well with mirrorless cameras. So yeah, don't be afraid of that at all. Another thing here too is I just noticed this morning that on DP Review, there's actually a buying guide. Now, it's pretty good, this buying guide, because it talks to you about what they believe is the best cameras. Now, remember, this is just their opinion, but it is talking about all different cameras that you can buy, ranging from cameras under $500, buying guide cameras under $1,000, and then buying guide cameras under $1,500, and it went to cameras under $2,000. So obviously, if you click onto these, you can then open up and have a look at which cameras they're recommending to buy. And look, you don't have to agree with it, but it's just something that you can actually have a look at. That was, I think that was the under 1,500. Let's look at over 2,000. I think it had the A7R2. A7R III, I mean, was the one they recommended in the D850, I think. So the cameras they're talking about here are the Sony A7R III, and also their pick is the Nikon D850. And you can see here that they also include all of these cameras that you can actually look at and read about. So if you are interested in having a look at a range, like you've got a fixed price of what you can afford, this may be a good article that you can go to see a number of different reviews for cameras in that similar price range. So it could be really, really beneficial for you to have a look at this article. And once again, I'll have that in the description down below, so you can have a look at that as well. Another thing here that DP Review have done has given a really good review of the A7R Mark III out now, and it talks about basically all of the pros and cons. Just saying that it's great autofocus, customizable controls, improved JPEG color. So that's saying they have improved the JPEG color, probably similar to what the Sony A9 has. I've noticed the Sony A9 has drastically improved the color. So if the A7R II has got the same color science, it's a really big step up. The joystick obviously is a real big improvement, and increased overall speed and responsiveness is there as well, and obviously a much better viewfinder. Things that they don't really like is it only supports one SD slot is UHS-2, and I don't understand why Sony haven't put 2 in there, but they have only given you 1. Write speeds can be lengthy even using fast cards, and that's probably because those file sizes are so large. So if you are going to continuously shoot in the buffer, it will take a while to write onto cards, it's saying. You cannot also switch to video mode while the buffer is clearing. And they're saying their subject tracking can be unreliable, which is interesting because I haven't found that in the A9. That may be one of the differences between the A9 and the A7R III. The only other thing I saw was no Play Memories app support. So that keeps coming up because you don't have things like, there's no intervalometer and things like that there, which is a real problem. And Sony really should add that via firmware. So that's a good article anyway. If you're thinking about buying the A7R III or you're waiting for one, it's quite good. Now there's another thing I'll show shortly talking about that, because that's one you have to read. Also, they're saying that on the Camera Store, this is the Camera Store TV has just put up a review this morning, and I'd watched that this morning. It's a very good review. I really like the Camera Store TV reviews. I find that they're probably one of the more unbiased review channels out there. So they do say it basically as they see it. One of the interesting things that they did show was he actually showed using the electronic shutter shooting some bike riders, and there was definitely issues when you were using the electronic shutter, and basically he said you really shouldn't be using the electronic shutter. He said you should be just using mechanical shutter due to the rolling shutter. So there was an issue with it. If you watch the video, you can see that the rider's wheel was totally out of shape. So that's one of the issues. If you're thinking about using this with the electronic shutter, I'll be using it with the mechanical shutter. And obviously if you're shooting with 8 frames to 10 frames per second, that shouldn't be an issue anyway. So that's basically why there is still definitely a market for the Sony A9 as well as the A7R III. They'll work beautifully together. But that's a really good article that you can have a look at. And they did film with it in the they did film this video with the A7R III as well, and the video looked quite good. They definitely have improved the full frame look of this camera. It's still not as good as the Super 35 mode, but they've definitely improved it. When they shot in Super 35 against full frame, you could see that the image was a little bit softer. That's one thing that's totally different with the A9. The A9 is probably the best camera that Sony have for shooting full frame. It's gorgeous. There's no difference between shooting full frame or in Super 35. So that's one of the real advantages with shooting with the Sony A9, but clearly you can't have the profiles with the A9. I think it's beer o'clock again, guys. So that's a really good article. I always enjoy watching those reviews. I just wish they'd bring out one for the Sony A9. I think they said they had issues with it. That's why that hasn't come out. And obviously I'll put the links for that down below. Another problem was, I did discuss this last week. I thought that they'd solve the star reader problem, but according to these new articles that's coming out, they haven't. There's still an issue with the star reader. I think it's been improved though. But they are saying that it is still there. So I think we were all a little bit early by saying that Sony had improved this star issue. I don't know why that needs to be there. There's got to be a reason why Sony is doing this. They should give you, even if it was an option in the firmware where you could turn that off, you know, and then basically have it the old way. Because like I said, when I went to New Zealand 2 years ago, there was no issue with that star reader at all. When I upgraded the firmware, there was an issue. So it's something that Sony have done, and they really need to undo that, or at least give you the option to turn that feature off, whatever they did. Because I noticed a big difference between how the cameras work the first time and how the cameras work the second time. So it is there, but I think they're saying that it definitely has improved, but it is still an issue. So if you are shooting stars, it's still going to be an issue if you're shooting Sony at this stage, which is so annoying. I just wish they'd get rid of that stupid feature, whatever is causing it. Also, there's a good review here of the 24 to 105 millimeter. This seems to be a really good lens, and this Mark Adelhuff, I'm not sure how you pronounce his name, but he's actually said that he believes that that's better than the 2470 Zeiss. So if you were thinking about buying the 2470, it may be a better thing to buy the 24-105. And I think probably if I was buying that now, I've got the 2470 f4, and I really quite like that for in studio. That's really the only time I use it now, though. I think, though, if I hadn't bought that 24-70, I would be buying the 24-105. So I think at the moment, looking at some reviews that are out there, and also the range that this gives you, and it's the same focal length, it's an f4 lens, I think I'd be buying the 24-105 rather than the 24-70. So this is an interesting article that's just talking about that and saying how the bokeh is very beautiful, and it's no flare, no CA, so it seems like it's a really good lens. And like I said, one probably that I may get one day for travel, because it would be a great travel lens if you had to take one lens with you. Or two lenses. I'd probably take this lens if I was taking my full frame camera, this lens, and then with a fast prime 35 or something, 2.8, something like that would probably do me. But yeah, great lens. So interesting. Let me know what you think about that. Do you think that you'd get that lens over the 24-70 f4? Also here, there's rumours the new Sony FE 400mm 2.8 OSS is expected to ship in September 2018. So it's a little less than under a year away. Oh, thank you so much, Delta Dave. He's just given me one for the A1 fund. That must be, is that for the Pro Photo? That comes out next year sometime. Thank you so much, mate. What else? So they're saying it should be released in September 2018, but there's no pictures yet of the lens. And I think this is probably going to be around about the $13,000 mark if it's released. It's not one that I'm going to be buying. You would really have to be into high-end sports or high-end birding, something like that, to justify the cost of this lens. But that's no different than if you're buying the 400mm Canon or the Nikon. But at least they're saying that it's going to be available. This is on B&H. So they're just saying expected availability, but new item coming soon. So it's definitely coming, just a matter of time. So once again, this is another thing that all the people that bag Sony aren't going to be able to go out there and say Sony don't have any long lenses. They'll just find something else that they can talk about. It's probably going to be a massive lens, though, at 2.8, 400mm. What else have we got? Also, the Sigma 16mm, this is for the A6500 or the A6300 or A6000 series. It's a 16mm f1.4. Basically is delayed till December the 1st. I think it's pre-order. You can pre-order it now, but they're saying shipment will start on December the 1st. And if you wanted to know what this looks like on the camera, this is actually it, which is not too bad actually for a 1.4 lens. It's fairly good in size. I thought it may have been a lot larger than that. So what does it give you? It gives you roughly around about a 30mm, I suppose, in focal length, but it's nice and fast, so it could be a great lens if you did want something around that, you know, the 24, 30mm sort of area. That's also very, very quick, which could be good. So I don't know how well it focuses. I'm not sure whether they talk about that in the articles. But you can have a read of that too. But I am actually surprised that it doesn't look too massive, and that's on the A7RIII. So yeah, it's fairly good. I mean, I'm quite happy with that. Let me know in the comments too whether anyone's thinking about getting that, because I will have a chat with you when we come on to the live questions in a few minutes. Another thing that was interesting here too was that this story of a scammer on Facebook who conned me and many others. I just wanted to bring this up because I wanted to make sure that you just be careful. I mean, I know some of you are wise enough not to do this, but a lot of people who basically are not aware of what goes on, this was a scam that actually happened. Now, this lady on I think she tried to sell it through Facebook, I believe. It was a Sony A7RIII with the 16 to 50mm lens. It was 500 new. She described it as being in pristine condition and barely used. Her ad was answered. Her ad was answered by a Facebook user named Cassidy. So basically, this girl said that she wanted to buy it. So she sold it, and she said she was going to pay for it, obviously, through PayPal. Now, that part's fine, but what actually happened later on was that this is where she made the big mistake. She actually said that as she was getting to ship out the camera, the buyer asked if the camera could be shipped to an address other than a PayPal profile address. Now, this is the issue, because immediately you do this, PayPal will no longer cover you. You have to mail it to the person's address that is in their PayPal address. If you don't do that, you're no longer covered if there's a dispute. And this is what's happened to this poor girl. So basically what's happened here is she's sold it. This girl has then said, is it okay, if you read what she said here, is it okay to ship to my house instead of my mum's house? My PayPal address is my mum's house when I used to live with her, but I want me to surprise her instead of the mailman laugh out loud. And then basically that's what this woman has done. She's mailed it off to this address. Now, even though she had tracking information and everything, you can see that she's done that here. She's had tracking information put in, but when it's been delivered to that person, they've then said to PayPal that they never received it. Now, the issue is, basically what's happened now is it's been denied because PayPal have said that it was never received at the original address. So this is what you've got to be really careful about, guys. If you do, if you are going to sell something, you really do have to make sure that you cover yourself. You've really got to stick to where it says on the PayPal address. I know I've sold stuff recently, and immediately I say, look, I'm not going to ship it anywhere overseas. Immediately you get all these, I don't know, they're scammers saying they need it shipped to their grandmother. They can't get down here. Can you ship it to their grandmother somewhere? It's always the same spiel that these guys leave. I personally don't ship anything. I just don't want to go through that hassle. So for me personally, if I'm selling anything, I only do it for cash, and I'll only do it if I meet somewhere. Now, I have done recently where they've come here, but I'm even starting now to think, oh, by the way, look at Susie, guys, back there. She's saying Happy Christmas to everyone. I personally should really go and meet in a shopping centre and exchange there, or have a friend with me or something like that too, because it is getting worse and worse. I've heard of a few people basically being robbed. If they go to somewhere that's quiet, they'll just grab it and run off. So you're better off to have someone with you and go to a crowded places so that you can't be intimidated or anything like that. So it is an issue. So I personally never post anything because I just don't want those type of issues. So it's just something to be aware of. And if you are going to sell something by PayPal, make sure it is the address that is in there listed in their PayPal profile. Don't ship it to somewhere else. So yeah, an interesting story. I looked at this the other day and I thought this was an interesting one because Manny Diana shared this. It's basically said, why my wife won't let me photograph women. And he talked about how when he first started shooting that there was issues with trust and things like that come up. And I suppose I often get this asked of me as well. With my wife, and often a lot of people will just say to me, how does your wife trust you when you're shooting all of these beautiful girls and women? So it's something similar that Manny is discussing in this video. So if you can, have a look at Manny's video, because it's really interesting to see what he and Diana have to say about the whole issue, and it's actually quite a good story if you want to look at that, because I think it is a fairly common one out there. The main thing I just say to people is, and this is true, I think, of anyone that's really into photography, apart from the creeps out there, that when I'm looking through a viewfinder particularly, I really don't even see what is there. And this is what has happened sometimes with war photographers and things like that. They've had people say to war photographers, how can they shoot the things that they see? And I've heard a number of times that people say when they're looking through the camera particularly, they're sort of not aware of that environment around them. They're just concentrating on the job at hand and doing what's required. So yes, jealousy can be an issue, but I think a lot of that really is trust in relationships and things like that, and that's what they discussed with Manny and Diana. In the end, they said it's not an issue now, and they both got used to it. And he said he had the same feelings because Diana was a model before that, and he had those same issues as well. And usually it's from people like they were talking about, that when you first start out, you're not aware of what goes on in that industry. And like I said, apart from the creeps out there that you see a lot of going on in Hollywood at the moment, most people that are photographers are genuine people, and they don't see it from that sexual background. They see it as art, and that's the way I just look at it. The other thing too is if you do the wrong thing, you're going to be caught out really, really quickly. And that's what I would often say to my wife and things like that. It would come back to them very, very fast that something was wrong. And then you wouldn't have a relationship anyway, and nothing's worth having that happen either. So, you know, it just comes down to that professionalism. You wouldn't get more work, you wouldn't be referred. And remember, if you're like me, and this is like any other photographer out there, referrals are the main part of getting work. And if you don't do the right thing, you will not be referred by these people, and that is going to affect your bottom line. So that's one of the other critical things as well. And I'm also not stupid. If I do things that are a little bit more risque, and I do those shoots, I often do girls in lingerie and things like that. I don't share those, but I do them. But if I do those sort of shoots, I always make sure that I've got someone else, a female, with me when I'm doing those shots, because it just covers you in case if something happens. And I just feel more comfortable that way. And, you know, and if the girl is changing, I ask her to go into another room, because my studio has multiple rooms. I'll ask her to go into another room, and she can change in there while I stay out in the other room. You've just got to be very sensible about the whole situation. But it's an interesting article or video if you wanted to have a look at that. So, you know, have a look at it and see what you think. I think that's all we have for questions. So what I'm going to do is open it up to questions, because I'd love to see what you guys have to say. So let's go here, and then I'm just going to scroll back to the beginning. So fire questions away, guys, because I'd love you to ask some things, and we can have a good discussion. I'll talk a little bit too about what I'm planning on the weekend for the wedding as well. There's obviously just people joining in the beginning there. Please too, guys, if you can, I'd love you if you could give me a thumbs up. That would be fantastic to get some more people on board. Someone's having a German Radler. Is that beer, is it, over there? I'm not sure. So what Stuart said, can someone help me? Why can't I use IAF on my Sony 24-70 lens with the A7R II? It says lens not compatible. Oh, that's interesting. I think, is that the only lens you have that, Stuart? If it is, I'd say there could be an issue with that lens. Have you taken the lens off and then put it back on, or is that happening every single time you actually do it? Is IAF working with your other lenses? So just let us know that, because that may help. So if you want to answer that a little bit further on. Do you think Sony will ever produce a crop sensor with a dual card slot like Canon 7D II? Probably one day. I don't think the next version of it will have it, because you'd struggle to keep it in the A6500. I'm just looking at it now, and I don't know how you'd fit because I'm filming with that now, the A6500. I don't know how you'd fit that, a dual card slot on that size body. So if they do that, they're going to have to make a larger body. It would be a great feature. I'm not saying it won't happen, but it certainly, I think, would have to be a larger body, and they may not want to do that. They may keep that dual card slots for the higher-ended full-frame cameras, but you never know, I suppose. Jim said, greetings from Minnesota on Thanksgiving Day Eve, where the turkey population is on decline. We don't have that here, Jim. Thanksgiving Day. When is that? Is that this week? Or is that what Black Friday is? Because I'm not sure. Is that what Black Friday is? What else have we got? Setting up camera equipment and a case of an Australian brew. Enjoy your Thanksgiving. What else we got? Teen said A7R2 is US 2,400, is not really that cheap. We have to pay GST upon reaching the Aussie shore. Grey imports are cheaper. Yeah, they are, Teen. I don't recommend buying grey import cameras though, because you don't get the warranty. You've got to be very, very careful if you do buy grey. Yes, it might be cheaper, but you won't get Sony warranty service done. You'll often have to send it back to whoever you purchased that through, and that can go anywhere or be gone for months. Also, you won't get Sony Pro support on that. To be honest, I would pay the extra to not buy grey import and get a brand that's basically you can get warranty here in Australia. And remember now, particularly in Australia, you'll get 2 years warranty now on Sony cameras. It's something that that you have to do now because it's legislated here by the government that you have to give basically 2 years warranty. So I think the standard warranty is only 12 months, so you're going to lose probably that extra 12 months warranty as well. I just don't think that it's worth it. I would pay a couple of $100 extra just to get the full-blown Sony version warranted, but that's just my opinion. Sam saying, g'day. Delta Dave, Sony has said to expect delays with the A7R3 rollout. They've been overwhelmed with pre-orders. And yeah, I just saw that, Dave, this morning. They were saying that they've had pre-orders way above what they expected. So that camera could take a while to get, obviously, if you haven't pre-ordered it. It's going to be interesting to see how many you can buy in shops early on, or if... just let me know, too, in the comments from the American people, is it still saying the 30th that you're getting that, or have you had any notification that it may take a little bit longer? I did hear the other day, it was yesterday actually, that they're meant to be delivered to here, Sony, in this, I think next week. I think it was the 24th, tomorrow, I think. So they are meant to be ordered. Oh, thank you so much, Michael. I really appreciate that so much, mate. Oh, Michael's in the house too. I've just seen him here. I did hear yesterday that someone said that they were expecting the pre-orders in Australia to be shipped out tomorrow, but you won't get them until Monday due to the shipping. So basically they're saying now that they are coming here, but I don't know if that will meet the number of pre-orders that are there or just a select few. So let me know in the comments whether you've heard anything about your orders being held back a little bit. What else have we got here? Roberto said Sony should make a camera with no video capabilities, just still photography. Yeah, I'm not sure if they'll do that, Roberto, and I really don't think it'd alter cost that much because the technology is just there, and I just don't think that's something that Sony want to actually do. I think one of the main reasons I transferred over to Sony from Nikon was due to the fact that you could buy... you could get video and stills in the same camera, and that was a really big issue for me. And Nikon just didn't have that, and they really still don't. Their video still sucks compared to what Sony have. Even the D850, the video is nowhere near as good. The focus is terrible compared to what the A7R3 will give you. Picture profiles and things like that. So I don't think that's going to happen, but they may one day, but I would be surprised if that's what they've done because Sony have been all about offering you all of these extra features. Cheers. What else have we got? Sam said, laugh out loud, no they shouldn't, it would just be a bit of a joke like the Nikon DF, and I think you're probably right, Sam. I don't think that would be an area that Sony would go to. And you know what, even the lower ended cameras, mums with cameras, etc., that just want to go out shooting their kids, guys that just buy it to go, you know, whatever, to go and film a soccer game or something like that. You want video in those cameras. Remember, you're dealing with something like an iPhone that can do both. Why on earth would you sell a camera that can't do both? I think you'd be shooting yourself in the foot now. If you bring out a camera that can't do reasonable video, people are just basically going to use their phones. And you don't want to go down that area of like point and shoots. Look what's happened to point and shoots. If you start holding features away, you're going to start losing people. So I agree, Sam. I think that would be a silly thing to do. Have done it all in reverse. First, I bought the Godox 8600 softboxes, Z Crane version 2, and so on. Now on Friday, I buy the Sony 85 1.4G Master for $1,200. Now I just need a camera. That's funny. Well, you know what? At least you've got good glass and you've got a good flash there. And you've also got a good crane as well. So what sort of camera are you going to buy? You know, just let us know. Hi, Alteric. Nice to see you here. Now, remember, when you're talking about cameras too, no matter what anyone tells you, you will always get better results if you buy better glass. If you were in an issue of, say, having an A7R2 and you were thinking about going to the A7R3, but you don't have good glass, my suggestion for you would be don't sell your A7R3, buy the good glass first, because glass makes a much bigger difference than what the camera ever will. If you could, say, afford something like a beautiful 85mm 1.8, you know, and if it was like the GM version, you'll see a massive difference than if you just change bodies and you were using inferior lenses. Lenses make a massive difference. And the other thing too, don't forget that lenses basically last forever. So it's not like you're upgrading lenses all the time. Bodies will basically almost a throwaway item. Lenses will not be. A good lens should last you 10 years. So there's a massive difference. So don't underestimate what a good lens will give you. Roberta said they would be able to put more stuff in there for still photography. Yeah, but they should still do that anyway, Roberto. Whether it shouldn't make any difference if they just take the video out. It just will be crippling the camera for no reason, I believe. That was from David. Thank you so much, David, for that donation. Roberto said, need to make a 135 1.8 for E-mount G-Master. That would be incredible. It's going to be a big lens, though. The 135 2.8 Zeiss is also quite a big lens. So if it was a 1.8 version of that, it's going to be a big honking lens. I'm not sure they may do that. I don't know whether, I'm hoping they would do one that's faster than 2.8. I think the Batis 135 2.8 is way too expensive for a 2.8 lens. It's beautiful. I've used that lens. It's gorgeous. The rendering is stunning, but what they're asking for that lens for a 2.8 lens is way too expensive. Let me know if you agree with that or not. Sam said, I've travelled with the 24 to 240mm and the 51.4, and although the zoom is slower, the 24.110 is more flexible for me and allow for some sport events, etc., and it does. And remember, it's always, especially particularly with travel, it's always having that wide range, and that's why I love travelling so much with the A6500 and the 18 to 105, because it gives you that massive focal range that you can use without having to, you know, fiddle around changing lenses, etc. And if you're just doing travel where you want really, and like I said, check some of my photos previously where I've used the A6500 and the 18 to 105 in New Zealand, and the images I think are stunning, and that's with that lens. Again, it gives me nice wide, and I've also got that lovely zoom as well. If you're shooting in JPEG, you can obviously use clear image zoom, and you can go up to 200mm on that. For video, you can also shoot up around 200mm. It's an amazing combo, and I think that 24 to 105 is going to give a similar thing. It's going to be a fantastic travel lens. Roberto said they should make an A6000 with a full-frame sensor. I don't think that's going to happen, Roberto. I don't think that's going to happen. You buy one, it would be a great camera. Keith said hi. Jakek, I think it's pronounced. I'm not sure. Is watching from Poland, 4 a.m. Wow, you're up early. What else have we got? Sam said, laugh out loud, Manny is married to a Latin woman. Poor soul. Latin women are the most jealous women in the planet. Trust me, I'm married to one. I wouldn't know because I haven't really met many, Sam, so that's interesting. They've said though on there they're fine with it now. If you look at that video, they're completely fine with what's going on. I think it was just early on, like Manny, I think was just a little bit jealous of Diana, and then it was the other way around, which is quite funny when you look at it. Once you get over that though, you're fine. And most relationships that are good are gonna, you know, it'll just won't be an issue any longer. What else have we got? Richard Oliver said, can you shoot stills on Super 35? And yes, you can. That's what I do all the time, Richard. Because I'm shooting the A7R II in weddings, I use that as my backup camera usually. I'm often using that on Super 35 because I don't need that high resolution. I don't need 42 megapixels. So for me personally, I always shoot Super 35 on that camera, apart from when I'm doing the main formals. Remember, the way that I work, I'm using my A9 for probably 80 to 90% of the shoot during the day, and then for other shots, and the way that this will work is I've got my 35 1.4 on my A9, and then I've got the 85 Batis on the A7R II. And then on Super 35, that's sort of the equivalent of about 135, I suppose you could say, around that area, on the using Super 35. So that gives me a great focal length. But remember, you're then cropping it. As soon as you go on Super 35, you're cropping it. That's how I'm saying the focal range changes to about that 135 length. And that gives me two great lenses that I can use. I've got the 85mm, or sort of has that 135 look focal length on it, and I've got the 35 on my full frame A9, and that works beautifully together, and the resolution is not so much that it gets ridiculous in shooting a whole wedding. Like I said, I don't need 40 odd megapixels out of the A7R II for the whole wedding. But the second I get into the more formal ones, that's what I'll do for, say, the bride prep, the ceremony, the reception, etc. But the bride formal shots, I'll use the A7R in 35 in full frame mode, because I want that full frame look. I also want the whole width that sensor can give me, because remember, if you're wanting to shoot wide, like using a 16 to 35, it's no good if you're using in crop mode, because you lose that wide angle. So that's when I will take it off Super 35 and go to full frame. Again, then I'm getting the full dynamic range, and I'm getting that full frame look for those formals that they may put as massive posters on their wall. So that's exactly how I use my cameras. So Michael's saying hi, which is nice. Michael, nice to see you in here. I would like to have beer and food. Oh, I'm having the beer, Keith. I'll probably have another one after this. Ben's probably watching, is coming over after this, because we've got to talk about tomorrow's wedding. What else have we got? Sam said, you're still drinking Coronas. I know, but the problem is I've got a couple of boxes of it, Sam. So until I finish that, I'm not buying any others. And I love it too, to be honest. Micro SAD cards, SD cards. I'm not sure what the question is there, Lex. Just ask it again, so I'm not quite sure what you're actually asking. Eric said, are you personally going to go with the A7R III over your A9? Sorry if you've answered this before. When is the Sony A9 next firmware due to come out? Well, I'm not sure when the Sony A9 next firmware is going to come out, Eric. I mean, no one knows at this stage. I'm sure it will eventually. No, I'm not going to go over with the A7R II over the A9. I'm happy at the moment using my A7R III with the A9, but possibly sometime next year I may buy the A7R III. I still won't sell my A7R II because I want those play memory apps like the time limit hack and the intervalometer, which is built into that camera. So I won't be selling my A9, but I may buy an A7R III sometime next year. I'm still waiting to see what Sony announced with the, say, the A7S, the new A7S version, or the A6700 or A7000 that may come out next year. So I'm just waiting to see what's sort of there first before I make a decision on what I want to do. If nothing good comes out, I then probably will buy the A7R III. But at this stage, no. But I definitely will probably get, I probably will get it sooner or later, yeah. It's a nice step up from the A7R II. But like I said, due to the fact I'm using the A9 for 90% of my work now, I just don't need to rush to get that. So I'm just waiting to see what happens to me. Personally, I want something that can shoot 4K 60p. So I'm just waiting to see what happens with that. Next firmware, well, let's wait and see. Hopefully they'll bring out a couple of the new things that's in the A7R II into that camera as well. Trump pardoned turkeys. What else have we got? Snapclick said, David Oster, when you get a new lens, how do you go about testing it? Well, I'll make sure I do test it fully before I go shooting. Usually I'll use my wife, and she hates it. I'll usually go shooting that. I don't do test charts and things like that. I'll just use it on a, like I said, just using my wife, friends and stuff like that before I actually go out shooting it. I know pretty quickly how good it is, but that's basically what I'll do. I'll just use it on family and friends before I actually go about using it on things. I definitely never do charts and things like that. Eric said, love your channel, by the way. You're one of the YouTubers that had me sold on getting my A9. Oh, thank you so much, Eric. Yeah, I love my A9. It's the best camera I've ever had in my life. It's just stunning, that camera. I just adore it. I'm still using the hired one. It's not hired. I'm still using the one that Sony have actually sent me. The issue was when I had that breakdown, it was the card that I was using. It was the Sony card. I haven't got it here. It's in the other room. It was the Sony card that was the issue, so it wasn't the Sony A9 that was the issue. But due to the fact that I'm having 2 weddings over this weekend and last weekend, I've asked them if I can keep the loaner until those weddings are finished, because I didn't want to make sure that I have to send it away and get the camera back. And even though they say it's overnight, there could be an issue somewhere with couriers, and then I don't get it in time to shoot the weddings that I'm shooting, so I just couldn't afford to do that. And this is a game where Sony have been amazing. They've allowed me to keep that camera for 2 weeks over when my camera's been fixed, but I've had weddings on Friday and Saturday, both weekends, and they've enabled me to keep that camera, and I'll send it back on Monday, and then obviously get my A9 back next week. So, you know, they've been fantastic. There's been no hurry. What a great service that Sony Pro Support have given, honestly. But thank you so much, Eric, for saying you love the channel so much. Jim said, Thanksgiving Day is the third Thursday of every November. Black Friday is when people have greatest risk of being tempted by crazy women shoppers. Keith said, David, Michael is buying beer for everyone. Yeah, cheers, Michael. I hope you're joining us. I hope you've got a beer over there. Michael said, yes, my Sony rep said 30th, some will be delivered, but he also said the cameras will come in waves. Okay. He said the orders are much higher than Sony would thought there would have been. Well, that's a great thing, guys. I mean, look, I know it can be frustrating waiting to get your camera, but honestly, this is good for Sony. It's good for us because at the end of the day, the more successful Sony is, the better things that they're going to give us. And I just think it's a great thing all around. And I'm really happy that they've are doing so well with this camera. And if you have to wait a fraction longer for your camera, just be patient. It will come. It's just a matter of holding out. Keith said Michael is the pump for his A7RIII is pumped. Roberto said, It is, but I just don't ever shoot video. And well, then if you don't ever shoot video, you just don't have to use that feature, Roberto. Remember, though, a lot of people do use both. So if you don't use it, just don't use it. Impresso said, I think it will be the A7RIII. Yeah, that's what you're going to get. Yep, lovely camera. It's going to be amazing, that camera. Sam said, bloody hell, it's raining in Melbourne and it's 33 degrees. Is it raining, is it? I haven't heard anything here. Yeah, it's pretty hot here. It's going to be hot all weekend, I believe, too. Michael said, Keith, I'm still on the A9 for me, but then again, I know more once I have the A7RIII for a few weeks. Michael, I don't think there's any issue with buying the A9. If you've got the money, clearly they are going to work fantastic together, and then you can cover anything. And that's the beauty of having the A7R2, the A7R3 and the A9. It lets you cover basically anything that you want to do. You've got that amazing portraits camera. You've also got that amazing wedding and events camera as well in the A9. So working in tandem together, they're going to be incredible. And I really do think they're the best two cameras to put together. So yeah, I mean, honestly, I think it's fantastic. Like I said, if I didn't have the A7R2, I would definitely be getting the A7R3. And I may even still get it yet. Can you zoom from tethering software, the 24 to 105? I'm not sure if you can do that or not. Someone else may be able to answer that. Dale Rosson said, wish the 18 to 105 was faster though. I found it okay, Dale. I've actually found it works well for me. Look, it's not a 1.8 lens, yes. But I just carry a fast prime with me. I carry the 24 1.8 lens with me. So it's not an issue. If it becomes an issue with low light, I'll just stick that 24 1.8 on. What a great traveling combo. Incredibly light. I've got the 18-105. I've got the Sony A7RIII and also the 24 1.8. I can cover anything in that combo. Perfect traveling combination. And I adore that whole combination. It's fantastic. What else have we got? Delta Dave, the A-mount version of the 135 1.8 is stunning, large and heavy. Do you find it too heavy though, Dave? Just let me know whether you think that's really manageable. See, this is the issue for me, that I just can't take those heavy lenses anymore over a long wedding. I'm probably because of my age. I start to feel it by the end of the day and I start to get a sore back. Have you got the 2470? Sorry, the 70-200. How does it compare to that? I'd be interesting to know how you find that weight. Let us know in the comments down below. Ben's daughter said hi. Hi Bailey, how are you? Keith said, I'd agree, Delta Dave. What do you think of the Optus 55? I've never used it, but I've heard that it's an amazing lens. But yeah, I've never used it, so I can't tell you what it is. But I can tell you, though, that this is the Sony 55 1.8, this lens, is still one of my favourite lenses. This lens is ridiculously sharp. I mean, it is incredibly sharp. I love this lens, and this is still the fastest focusing lens that I've got out of all of my lenses, and it's probably the fastest focusing lens that I've ever tried that Sony have had. Incredible. So whenever I'm shooting low light, in wedding receptions, things like that, or if I'm shooting in the city or whatever late at night, if the camera's starting to struggle focusing, this is what I'll use. It's stunning. I adore this lens, and it's one lens that I'd never sell. Michael said, Delta Dave, if they make it for me, I'm FE, I'm 100% in. I'm not sure what that was. Is that the 135, Michael? He said, so he said he's using that 135 on his Minolta A9 film camera and the results are breathtaking. Okay. For dual slots on the A6500, maybe micro dual SD. Yeah, I don't know if I'd want to go micro. I hate them. Look, I use them in my drones. I just hate them. I wouldn't. I'd prefer them to keep one card in and use two micro SD cards. Yeah, I wouldn't like them to go down that micro. I just found them too hard to hold and they're easy to lose. And oh yeah, I wouldn't want them to go down that way. What else? Thinking about joining the Sony A9 or the A7RIII, what do you recommend for weddings? Look, Hector, if you're only shooting weddings solely, I'd get the A9. If you're shooting mostly portraits, I would go for the A7RIII, or if you're shooting landscapes, the A7RIII. If you're mostly doing weddings, events, that sort of stuff mixed in with portraits, I'll get the A9. Sports, definitely get the A9. If you're doing landscapes or just shooting in studio portraits, I'd be getting the A7RIII. Richard said, David, is the 35 2.8... I love that lens, Richard. That's also one of my favourite lenses. It's that lens too is incredibly sharp. So tiny. I haven't got it in here. No, I haven't got it in here. It's really tiny. Great for travel. Great. It's an amazing lens for street photography. If you want to go around and do street photography and not have anyone really notice what you're doing, it's a fantastic lens. It's great also if you want to, say, go in concerts, things like that, because they often look at the size of the camera and the size of the lens. And I've got into concerts before with the Sony cameras with that lens because they don't think it's a professional camera, and I love that aspect of it. It's tiny, it's fast. 2.8 is often good enough in low light, especially with the high ISO that you can get from the new full frame cameras. That lens is full frame, obviously, but yes, dead sharp. That also is one of my favourite lenses, and I always use that in weddings on another camera as well. I usually give that to my assistants to shoot on one of the A7R3s, A7R2s as well. What else have we got? Stuart said, I've taken the lens off, but no change. It's only my lens. It's my, so it's your only lens, Stuart. Okay, well, what I'd recommend, Stuart, is go to a shop and try another lens out. Go to any camera shop and just try a lens out. They'll let you do that in any camera shop. Get another native Sony lens and then see if AF works. If AF doesn't work on that lens, then it could be an issue with hardware. You have got AF turned on, though, haven't you, in the menu options? So, and you also have to, I can't remember what your correct exposure is. That I'm pretty sure that you have to have, I'm just going to check. Let me just go through here quickly. I've set my IAF up to C1. So make sure that it is set up to, try setting it up to something like that, one of your quick release buttons, to see that it is actually turned on. But if you go to a shop and then it's not working with that lens, well, then you know it's either a hardware issue or you just haven't got the IAF turned on. You have got a face detect on also, because that will, basically, I think you have to have that working to get IAF working as well. And which camera, I can't remember which camera you have. You may also have to be in continuous focus as well. What else have we got? Keith said, "Oh man, you invited me to Michael for dinner." I'm not sure who that was about. You can come over here for dinner if you're ever over Aussie. Like I said to any of you guys, if you're ever over in Australia, I'll certainly have a shoot with you guys. I'll take you around. Snapclick said, "Which cards do you use on your A9? Just ordered Alexa 64300. I'm using the latest Sony card, Snapclick. I'm using the one that's the 300 megabyte, 288, whatever it is. It's their fastest card that they've just released. Because I'm shooting on the A9, I want that buffer to clear as quickly as possible. I'm using the fastest cards that Sony have. So that's the one that I'm actually using. They were $200 odd, I think. I'm using the 128 gigabyte cards, which last me forever. I think I get around about 4,000 images on it. So that's the card that I'm using, the latest high-end Sony cards that were just released at the same time as the A9. I need a beer and some tofu. Sam said I'm in the eastern suburbs. Oh, okay. That's cool, Sam. Michael said you have an invite. Well, guys, if I do come over to the US, I'm certainly going to have a meet up with you guys, and I may next year. So I'll let you know if that's going to happen, and we'll certainly all get together and have a shoot, and definitely have a beer all together over there. You can show me some of your nice US beers. I love trying different beers when I'm traveling. Lex said, love the 55 1.8. Tony said, hi all, finally caught a live broadcast. Glad to see you here, Tony. Keith said, David, it's the 80 to 200 2.8. It's the 80 to 200 2.8. It's sharp and it works well, and I think it focuses faster than the 70 to 200 for the A mount. Oh, okay. Toby said, is there a difference between 32 gigabyte SD and the 64 when shooting video? No, there'll be no difference in the card size. It's just you can shoot longer. The main thing that I can always say is you should always buy the fastest card that you can afford, because I only ever use SanDisk. They're the only cards that I've ever used, apart from the Sony one that I bought when the A9 came out, because SanDisk at that time didn't have the same speed rating as what the Sony was. And the interesting thing is that card failed. So I'm hoping that's not an issue with those Sony cards. And that's the first card, to be honest, that I've ever had failed, and it's the first time I've moved outside SanDisk. So I'm definitely hoping that it's not an issue with Sony and those cards. But I suppose that's one of the benefits with shooting with dual card slots, because if that did happen, I was protected because it was shot to JPEG on the second card. So I did have that protection. Like if I had that in my A7RIII, I would have been screwed, because that would have been corrupted and I couldn't have fixed it. So that's one definite advantage with having a camera with dual card slots. It's the first time it's ever happened to me. It's the first time I have not used SanDisk. This was the Sony card. Yeah, so I'm hoping it's not an issue with those cards. I haven't heard anyone else having issues with those cards, though. Let me know in the discussion here, guys, whether any of you are using that latest Sony high-end card, because I'd love to know if any of you have had issues with it. What else have we got? Michael said the Sony lens system is really starting to look great, along with all the third-party lenses and all the options of the different camera bodies. I know, Michael, that people that whinge about Sony's lenses don't know what they're talking about, because clearly there's enough for the average person. When that 400 comes out, there's even enough for sport and birding. At the moment, though, you can't tell me, anyone that's not a Sony user, and they whinge about Sony's lenses, I've got ample for what I would ever need. How many lenses do you honestly need? Sony have easily got the average wedding, portrait, landscape, event photographer covered with all of their lenses. The only thing that they haven't got at this stage is for sports, and that's being addressed next year. So clearly they're going to have to whinge about something else. Those people will always whinge about something. They used to whinge about the focus. Now they can't whinge about the focus. They'll talk about something else. The second they have enough lenses out, they'll whinge about something else as well. I'll just ignore them. They don't know what they're talking about. What else have we got? Lex said, I agree, the 35 2.8 is awesome. I use that and the 55 for concerts. I know, what great lenses to take in. They're so tiny, beautiful and sharp, and lovely and quick. Fantastic for low light focusing. Both of those lenses are really good, actually. The 55 particularly is so good for low light. Delta Dave, if I do switch over to the dark side E-mount, the 55 1.8 will be my first lens purchase. Great lens, David. Like I said, I'll never get rid of that lens. When I first got it, when I got the Batis, I thought, oh, I'll get rid of it because I had the 35 1.4 and also the Batis. But I'm so glad that I've kept it, because I still keep going to back to that lens, particularly for low light stuff. And it's sharper than anything I've got. It's super sharp. Lex said, MC Perso said, which is best for the gimbal? Well, I use a 10 to 18 on my gimbal because I'm using the A6500. I use the 10 to 18. If I need something that's, you know, the good depth of field, I'll use the 24 1.8. But most of the time on the gimbal, I'm using the A6300 or the A6500 with the 10 to 18 millimeter f4 lens, which is ample. And being nice and wide, everything's in focus. So you can't basically get anything that's out of focus. So that's a great combo for using it on a gimbal. If you're using full frame lenses, I probably, well, it depends on the weight. See, the issue is too, guys, the more weight you carry, it gets uncomfortable. So for me, I like to have things that are really light. If it was me using it on a gimbal, I'd probably use my A7RIII, and I'd still use the 10 to 18 millimeter lens on it, and I'd have it on Super 35. But that's the way that I would shoot. I like that wide focal length. The other really good lens too is the 18 to 105 is also a really good lens on the A6500 on a gimbal as well, because you've got that nice wide look. You've also got nice and long as well, and that lens is not that heavy, so that's also a great lens for a gimbal too if you're using the A6500, something like that. And that's oh no, there's a couple more down here. I was a bit too quick. MC Pizzo said you should come to Denmark when Mary becomes a queen. Yeah, that would be cool. I'd love to go to Denmark. I'd love to travel all around Europe. I went a couple of years ago, but I only went to the UK and to France. So I may get over there again. I'm possibly not. Well, I'm debating next year whether to go to the US or whether to go to Europe. So I'll let you guys know what I end up deciding to do. Streets of Vancouver's here. Tony said, when you talked about Super 35, what is your resolution and megapixels in that mode? You get about 18 megapixels, I think, Tony. So when you're shooting with the A7RIII, it drops to about 18, I think, which is ample for what I need for weddings. Remember, I'm only shooting the bride getting ready, the family formals, the church, and also the reception. I don't need those massive resolution files, so 18 megapixels is ample. I used to shoot with a D3S, which is 12. So that shows you that the 18 megapixels is ample. So Super 35 is fantastic if you want to lower that resolution. I just wish Sony would bring down a lower RAW version, so like Canon do, that you could shoot, you know, a 20 megapixel RAW file. That would be fantastic. Hopefully one day they'll do that. Snapclick said, David, if you go to the US, please try Yellinga beer. Well, you can buy me one when I'm over there. or at least show me and I'll buy you guys one. God, I wish I could get it here in Canada. Oh, you're in Canada. Well, I'd love to go to Canada too. Canada, my wife, actually, that's on her bucket list. She really does want to go to Canada. I've heard it's a lot like New Zealand, actually, which was totally beautiful as well. Keith said, yes, I think it's 18 megapixel. I think it is. I think it's 18. David, do you format your card in camera after every use? Yes, I do. I never format it on the computer. Streets of Vancouver, I'll always format it on the in the camera. The thing that I'll always do before a wedding, because I have multiple cameras, I'll always format all of my cards, and you should always do that in camera. It's one of the things that they say you can get failures if you try and format on a computer and things like that. Make sure you always format in the camera. And I also set all the clocks to the exact same time so that everything syncs up between all of them. Always do that before a wedding. Streets of Vancouver, I haven't had an issue with Sony cards in the past few years. Well, thanks for that. Probably just my card then. I was probably just unlucky. But they've replaced it. They sent me another one yesterday, so I have got another one. Michael said, I only use Sony cards and the new ones as well. No problems at all. I think you just got a bad card. Yeah, and I probably did, Michael, and it's probably something that won't happen again. I mean, like I said, they've sent me a new one now, so, you know, I hopefully won't have any issues with that. Delta Dave said, remember back in the day when the haters used to whinge about the EVF? I know, that's the thing. They'll always whinge about something. And that's what half of these people do whinge about. And usually it's because they're scared. That's the main thing about what's going on. They're frightened about they've spent all this money on this gear. And basically Sony are just kicking their ass. And, you know, that they just can't, they can't compete. And that's why they're starting to think of anything they can to bag it. What else have we got there? The first EVF from Sony was the Sony DCR1 in 2003. So, wow, it's amazing how much technology has changed. Toby said, is there a big difference between the Canon and the new Sony 24-105? Well, no, I've heard, I haven't used it yet, but I have heard that the Sony version is better than what the Canon version is from people that have tested it. So it's meant to be a stellar lens. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, I may get that eventually for travel because it definitely does interest me if I want to travel with my full frame lenses. So, yeah, that's what I've heard, though. I've heard it's better than the Canon version. Guys, too, if you can, please, I'd really appreciate it if you could give me a thumbs up, too. I really would appreciate that. What else have we got here? Streets of Vancouver said, I love the EVF, though I still take my A900 out every couple of months and love the brightness of that PVF, yeah. You know what, like I said, when I got that Canon 5D Mark IV, when I was testing the Profoto A1, I hated going back to the viewfinder. Losing the EVF, I just hated it. I would never, ever want to lose an EVF now after shooting with it. Once you go the EVF, you can't go back. You really can't. Michael said, I use the Sony 12-24 FE on the Crane 2 and it's working great. Yeah, that Crane 2 is amazing. Do you find that's a little bit heavy, Michael? Because I have thought about buying that myself, but I just don't like the sounds of the weight on that. Remember, I'm often holding two cameras, so I'm holding, you'd have to laugh, because when I'm doing the weddings, and I'll be doing this on Saturday, I'm holding the Crane in one hand, and I'm actually holding the camera in the other hand, or I'm holding the gimbal in one hand and the camera in the other one. So if that Crane version 2 is quite heavy, it probably will put it outside of me being able to do that. So that's why I like the gimbal I've got with the A6500 and the 10-18, because it is really light. So let me know whether you think that's really quite heavy, that working combo, Michael. Keith said, if it was ahead of its time. Yeah, that's talking about that camera, and it was. Sony have always been ahead of their time. Streets of Vancouver said that's brilliant advice regarding the syncing on the time on the cameras. I know I used to come against that all the time, and what I'll do is I'll use my iPhone so I get a constant time. I'll then open up the settings on each camera with the seconds. I'll put the minutes up to the exact same time and then just go bang, 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 and they're all synced within, 1 second or so. I do that all the time. Johnny Hall just joined. Good to see you here, Johnny. We're going to be finished in a minute, but you can go back over the video in a second anyway. Kieran and Leanne said, David, remember me? Haven't been on for a month or so. Of course I have, mate. Michael said, I'm thinking if they make the RAW size smaller, like a 20, it might affect other camera sales. And you could be right, Michael, too. You may be right that that's why they haven't brought that figure in. I do wish that they do it, though. But like I said, the solution to it is to shoot Super 35. but you do lose the full frame. That's the problem. What's your experience using crop sensor native Sony lenses on the A7R II? I can get the A7R III, but I can't afford the crop lenses. I've never had issues using crop sensor lenses. You've got to be in Super 35 though, so like I said, you will lose that wide angle. The 10 to 18 is an interesting lens because if you use that on 10 to 18. At 10, you will see like a black bars that come right around the image. So they'll sort of look like that, and you'll see it'll be a black. It almost looks like a vignette that you've put around the outside. But the beauty of that lens is it works from 12mm. So if I'm shooting something where at the end of every wedding, I'll do the whole wedding party, and you know there may be 150 people there. Sometimes there's 300, and you know if I get them to all stand there straight after the wedding ceremony and take a whole group photo. Sometimes the 16 to 35 is not wide enough to get the whole group party in without me going way too far back. So I will use the 10 to 18 on full frame, and I can use that from 12mm without those bars appearing. So if I do need 12mm, you can use that lens. That's why that lens is so good in a lot of respects, because it gives you that really wide on the A6500, and you also get 12mm on the full frame, and it goes to 14, so you get 12 to 14 on the full frame. So it's a great lens, and I will use it on full frame like that. But yeah, if you can't afford full frame lenses, you can use the APS-C lenses on it, but you have to be shooting in Super 35. Yeah, Michael said, yes, it's a bit heavy. Stay with what you have. It's not too heavy for me, but I don't mind. Look, if I was shooting just video on its own, Michael, I probably would stick to that, because I would be able to use two hands and it wouldn't be an issue about it being so heavy. But having it where I'm using two cameras and I want to use run and gun and I'm doing sort of fusion, which is stills and video at the same time, it probably will be too heavy for me. I nearly bought it, but I stopped when I thought it may be too heavy for me. But I've heard it's a great gimbal. What else have we got? So Keith's just about to go. MC Princess said good night. Thanks for watching, mate. Johnny said, David, do you plan to buy the A7R III? I said, I've discussed it earlier, Johnny, possibly next year. I'm still not sure. I'm waiting to see what Sony release next. A7R, the A7S, I'm going to see what that has to offer, and also say the A6-7000 or whatever that's going to be before I make a decision. If they don't give me what I want, I probably will buy the A7R III. Toby said, thanks for the information to subscribe. Thanks for subscribing, mate. Well, that's about it, guys. I think, what's the time? I think we've been on for nearly, just a bit over an hour. So we might call it a day. I am doing 2 weddings over the weekend, tomorrow and Friday, tomorrow and Saturday. I'll come back to that in a second, Michael. So I will try and do a couple of live feeds if you want to see what's going on from these weddings. I like to give sort of brief tips and tricks and stuff like that. So I will do that over the coming days, and I'm definitely going to go back to setting up your wedding and photography business. So last couple of questions. Michael said, what do you feel about the manual lenses popping up? Do you like the older look of these lenses better than the new lenses? I'm not sure if I like them better, Michael, but they certainly have a place. Sometimes I do like vintage looks. If you look at a lot of my work, I really do like that vintagey look that you can get from some of these lenses. Plus, it's fun. I actually think using manual lenses is great fun, and it brings back that great feeling like you used to have from years ago. Remember, I started on film with manual focus lenses and stuff like that, and then I lost all that when I went to the digital. But now going back and using manual lenses, I actually really enjoy it. And there's something about manually focusing that feels so nice, especially if it's not a fly-by-wire lens. It really is quite beautiful to do, and it slows you down. You can think about the moment a little bit more. Half of the time, the problem with digital photography is you become too much of a run-and-gun type shooter. So having that manual focus lens slows you down, and you have to think about doing it. I challenge you all, get a manual focus lens and go out and do some street photography and see how much you'll enjoy it. I guarantee you will. Thanks for the info, very inspirational. Thanks so much for saying that. Rob said, has the GH5 done enough to make it great? Well, I'm happy with the GH5, Rob. I'm really happy with it, and I'll be using that on Sunday when I have the wedding video. You'll see those results come up soon. But yeah, look, I'm really happy with it. And to be honest, I am quite happy I've got that camera because it's probably going to be 35 to 38 where I'm going to shoot on Saturday. And shooting the wedding, I know I'm going to be able to leave that camera without it overheating. Now, I haven't had my Sonys overheat, but it was always in the back of my mind, if I had that in the sun, it potentially could overheat if I had to leave it unattended. I'm not going to have that issue with the GH5. So for me personally, that's a big thing. Plus, I'm going to be able to shoot 4K 60 of the bride walking and doing all those sort of things. So yeah, it's going to be great. Will it replace my Sony stuff? No, no way. But remember I've said this often, that there's no perfect camera. And I'm using all these cameras together, which work beautifully together. It's just a great camera. The GH5 is a great camera, but I certainly don't really use it for stills. But I just posted one I put on for stills the other day, and it's quite beautiful if that's what you want to use for stills. But I'm still going to be using my A9 and the A7RIII for stills. Lex said I adapt vintage Minolta lenses. Yeah, and they would be. It's just so much fun. Thanks, Dave. Like always. Okay, my go-to man. Thanks, Michael. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to head off. I've got to meet Ben in about 10 minutes. We're going to discuss tomorrow's wedding. He's going to be second shooting with me. And then obviously I've got another shoot that I've got to go to on Saturday, which I'm really excited for as well. I will put some of those videos online, just live. But until then, guys, I'll catch you all again for the next video. And g'day from down under. Susie's saying Happy Christmas back there. And I'll see you again soon for the next video. Bye for now.